is the trustee, where you come up and you put a dot next to the one that you think is the most important. So take notes as we're going along. If you have questions on specifics, I think we want this to be a conversation to the extent possible, but no, we have a time limit. If we got to sort of speed it up, we reserve the right to do that. And then after sort of our dot exercise, we'll sort of reconvene, and that's what we can really span. Joy, what am I missing?
Just wanted to clarify that when we take a pause between sections, if you have questions, it's more so to make sure you understand what the recommendations are. And at that point, we're not necessarily looking for your input. We just want to make sure we're clear before we move on to the next section. And then we're going to help provide ample time to really get into the meat of it. So sorry for you.
And the other important point that Ed talked to us about that we may want to make sure we convene to you guys is that there is a lot of work going to be described here, right? Like a big things. But to be very clear, this platform is directed towards the administration. This is the work that the administration is supposed to be doing. Now, the different organizations in this room are absolutely going to be a huge part of that, but we don't want you to think about this as like, this is what you should be doing. This is specifically what the administration is going to be doing, and we'll all be different cogs in that high functioning machine. So I'll kick it off. We're going to start with housing policy. The first one, engage CDCs and CMP to review the City of Cleveland's 10-year housing plan and recommend amendments and action moving forward. So I think the gist of it there, they talked about this in the opening, is that there was a lot of really good work, a lot of really good engagement that went into that plan, and the timing of it has it right on a precipice of change, right? What we don't want to see is all of that work, all of that sort of convening just put on a shelf and then not truly embraced by the next administration simply because it isn't theirs, right? Now there will be changes maybe in how it's administered or thoughts about it, but the work is the work, and it came from all different types of practitioners in this room. Really think it's important to run with that moving forward.
And have you all seen the plan? It's awesome. If you haven't, we encourage you to check it out. It's on the city's website, right? You know?
Separate website, clevelandhousingplan.com.
All right, thank you for that.
It is really something.
Yeah. And also welcome to our folks in the Zoom room.
Yeah, we forgot to say hi to you guys. Hi, everybody. New with this, I guess.
Okay, so I'll go on to the next point, which is launch a locally funded housing trust fund in partnership with Cuyahoga County to support the preservation and production of affordable housing. Non-federal investments should be made for both capital and operational expenses. And so you all may see the words housing trust fund and think, oh, we already have that. But this recommendation is particularly around a locally funded non-federal source. And it will help leverage the existing federal sources. We know that federal sources are great, but sometimes they tie your hands. And this is a needed tool, and we need a little bit more flexibility in how we apply it.
Yeah, is there any more double-edged sword than federal money, right? Like you really need it, it's important, but it's inherently limited, and there's just a lot of constraints come with it. We have to find ways to sort of fill those gaps that's maybe a little more deployable, flexible, and can be utilized a little more easily. Can't live without it, but there needs to be supplements. We need to think creatively on how to get those. Next one, establish a committee that provides oversight on the compliance and reporting requirements of Cleveland's Community Reinvestment Act initiative. So CRA, quite simply, we need to be able to hold the banks accountable. Frank Ford, God love him, but I hate once a year reading his report that shows a tenth of what they're supposed to be doing and then feeling like that's just normal and nobody seems to be doing anything about it. That law is in place for a reason. Those needs are still very, very real. And it seems like it's just way too easy for large banking institutions to not meet those goals and not serve the communities that support them and take their deposits and use them elsewhere around the country. So we have it in place, really lean into it, make sure that they're meeting those needs. And there's a bunch of different ways an administration can do that, right? They have to work in this town. We can adopt new legislation, but that's what the administration should be established.
Thank you, Justin. The next point is to create policies and practices that proactively a lot of alliteration. I'm going to start over. Create policies and practices that proactively preclude predatory investing in Cleveland's housing market. And you may feel like that statement, we all agree, but it's very broad. And so we know it will take a lot of tools. So start thinking about, what tools you think would be good. I'm sure you sat at your desk and thought, if the city of Cleveland would only do blank around predatory lending. So those are the things we're going to be wanting to hear from you today around. Justin.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, that problem got exacerbated recently when sheriff sales went online. So the out-of-state investors that want to just scoop up property for what they see as a deal can do it from the comfort of their home now. I think it was inevitable that it was going to go online, but there are so many tools that you can put in that can help make folks be more responsible that we just aren't doing yet. With, especially in COVID, right? Like there was so much just sort of static cash out there. Where did people put it? They put it in what they saw cheap real estate. So now we have CDCs that could buy a home for $5,000 to $10,000, rehab it, and move in there. That same home is $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. All of the good actors are now priced out of the market, and that's a problem, right? We can't engage in the real estate space, then we can't do the good work. So it's a huge, huge issue. Lots of tools need to be thought about there. Okay, the next one: expand and monitor the certificate of disclosure, the city's certificate of disclosure program. Show of hands, who knows what the certificate of disclosure program is? So for those at home, we're looking at about less than a third of yeses there, and therein lies the problem, right? So a very, very brief overview. Basically what it does is it allows building and housing in the city to make it a lot more easy to discover if there are outstanding code violations on a home. So it's an informative piece, basically. It says that this house has been inspected, it is condemned, or it has these issues, so that buyers can make more informed buying decisions. It is kind of a middle ground in front of a point of sale inspection. So does everybody know what point of sale is? Yep. So it's you get it inspected. You got to put money into escrow to make repairs. What isn't being recommended here is not a point of sale inspection. I think that there's a lot of different ways to sort of look at that, and people in a lot of different places on it. I think maybe universally, if there would be disagreement if you were to take the point of sale program that already exists and say a Shaker or Cleveland Heights and just do that in Cleveland. I don't think anybody thinks that's a good idea, but there are ways to tweak a program that could maybe have something that looks like that could help curb investment that isn't fixing homes. But there's a lot of equity and other issues that need to be thought of in a program like that. But we do have a program here already that is designed to do some part of that, make that program more known, implement it in a much different way. Okay, so I think that's the end of the first housing policy section here. I'll open it up. Any thoughts, questions, any one of these that stood out more or people have questions on?
Well, Justin, I have a thought just to add to the last point about the certificate of disclosure. Before we had our pre-meeting for this, I would have been one of those people who didn't raise my hand because I didn't know what it was either. And so for me, what I thought about in our neighborhoods of Central Kent and Buckeye, we see a lot of folks who inherit houses for whatever reason. And if there were a traditional point of sale model, those folks probably wouldn't be able to just come up with $30,000 because they weren't even in the market to purchase a house. But we have a lot of people who then come to us saying, oh, this house has all of these needs and repairs, but no car can help us. And we have limited resources. So I'm curious to see how this certificate of disclosure could help folks in that situation so they know what they're getting into, and then they can make the determination of whether or not they're ready for that responsibility.
Yep. Yeah, so thoughts, questions, considerations in this first section here. And I know virtually everybody in this room wouldn't describe any of you as unopinionated or shy. So. Sir.
I've got one. When we're talking about the predatory investing, we've had a lot of that in Westtown, people buying up, and they are consistently up and down the line our worst landlords and owners. We're having to send out citations for grass cuttings to people in New York State.
Yeah.
We have houses that are going to hell, and we have residents that are calling and wanting to know who they get in touch with. Well, your person lives in Colorado.
Yep.
So we came right there. I don't exactly know what the answer is other than a better vetting process before purchasing, because I mean, it's free market economy, like anybody can buy whatever they want. But that is definitely to me something that we need to find the system to help.
Yep. And it affects so many other things, like it's just one domino that knocks.
Oh yeah, it ties up the person in my office that handles code and everything.
Right.
He's tied up all the time with trying to get in touch with somebody in some other state.
Yep.
Could you tell us your name and the organization?
Oh,
you're with?
Daniel Wagner, Westtown Community Development Corporation.
Thanks, Daniel.
All right, and just for the folks in the Zoom room, Daniel was just making a point that he sees the need for the predatory lending protections because it's hard as a CDC to identify these out-of-state owners who aren't taking care of their properties.
And
Hi, I'm AJ from Greater Colorado Development Corporation. And I kind of want to build up what the gentleman back there was saying. In our case, we have, there's actually two very prominent local lease-to-own companies. One is MJB and the other one is Brokewood. And the one thing I had noticed, especially when we were looking at in a particular area over in Nottingham and Collingwood, I was just looking at private, like home prices.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe a 2-bedroom, 1-bath had went for $120.
Yep.
I go back and I look and I see that they have bought it for 5,000. It's just like, how
Yep.
do you even build equity on that?
Yep.
And since these homes never make it to the MLS, I don't think so.
Usually not. Yeah.
Usually not.
And on top of that, we just look at some of the improvements I've actually seen where they waited out the warranty period.
Yeah.
And then let the residents stuck with that. And then even saw a news report, a news story on Grovewood properties where over in the Lee Harbor neighborhood, they had did the same thing and it just inflated pricing.
Yeah.
So it's just like, how do you build equity? Well, you can't really build equity. And so what happens when you repair the garage is falling?
Yep.
So I just kind of wanted to build off that, like there's actually two very prominent local ones.
Yeah, so I that's a couple great points there. One, that the issue isn't just with out-of-state investors. There's some bad local actors, and it's too easy to do that too.
Mhm.
The other, what I think it really highlights is it isn't singular to the home itself. Like it affects the entire market, and whether it's inflating the prices beyond reason, they're not hitting the MLS looking like a normal transaction to raise the perceived valuation of the neighborhood. So many things are not in sequence with how the market is supposed to function, that it creates just a myriad of other problems. So it's a huge one on this list. Any other thoughts and questions in this section? Peggy.
Justin, Peggy here, Greater Collinwood. To me, really, it's trying to get a locally funded housing trust fund for some of the projects, but more to the point, I work with AJ and Sigourney, and we've got some of the harder hit parts of Glenville, Euclid Green, et cetera. We can't get, no, it doesn't matter. I can have a person with a really good credit score because they've saved all their life. Nobody's lending in my area.
Yep.
It is so hard to get even a home loan, let alone get a loan for someone who needs a home repair. And so trying to find the products that really, again, making the banks that make money off of our, the money that we deposit with them or any of the investments the city or county have, leveraging those to help the people in these neighborhoods. I'm decimated when Frank's report comes out, and we
Yep.
talk to these banks, like sat through these CRA hearings, and we're doing the best we can, and we're doing. No, you're not. I just don't believe it. After I've been here for 14 years,
Yeah.
doing this work, we've got to do better. And the mayor, the new incoming mayor, the administration they have to leverage this. If we're going to be able to get parts of the city to grow at the rate that is going to make up for the decimated growth that they've had over these past several decades.
Those are great points. So those at home, Peggy Kiersey was making the point that it's kind of interesting. The reason we need a locally funded housing trust fund is because the banks aren't lending in these spaces and meeting their CRA needs, right? So one of these requires the need of another, and we've been hearing for decades that we're doing the best we can, and it's just not there. She also made the point that even when you have a well-qualified potential borrower for a home repair or a purchase, because the markets are so stagnant, because the banks won't lend in these areas, they can't get a traditional loan. And we'll talk about it a little bit more, the need for sort of alternative financing with CDFIs, but it's all of these like intertwined with one another, and it's interesting to sort of see like it's almost a ridiculous question to ask like which one of these is the most important, because like they're all part of one another in some way, but they do have their nuances, and it's really important that the upcoming administration recognize, appreciate, and work on those. Yeah, Dario,
Good morning or afternoon.
Good afternoon.
what time is it? What's time?
It's morning somewhere.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark, Rico's Foundation. Trying to preclude a predatory investment, right? That's really where it sticks out to me. As far as like Cleveland hasn't adopted a model where they say that they, that we're moving towards a rental registry. But I really think that the point of sale it's needed on a number of levels because an investor in California, his dollar means way more than an investor here.
Yep.
I mean, his dollar can go way more in terms of return on investment. And so I think that it will help with our lead issue. It will help with our constant flipping issue because the reason why investors aren't, heavily in the suburbs because those point of sale sort of protects those nuances that they're not trying to, commit to here in Cleveland.
Yep.
And so that's something that the city of Cleveland should, and holistically, because you can't say I want to start with a rental registry without having a point of sale. That's just in my eyes because there's going to be loopholes. Ms. Johnson also said it, and I think somebody else said it, that, if it's not listed on the MLS, then technically there's either heirs, there's either an estate, or there's quick claim deeds where I'm going to give you cash and we're going to say like you buy a car, like a used vehicle, we go together and we say that it was a gift, and that's what's happening. So, these investors are
I've never done that though, right?
not at all. Never. But these investors are doing that exact same thing here in Cleveland.
Yep.
And so, and they're really headhunting a lot of these investors like MJP, Grovewood, who are legendary really in this market, who's been here for a long time, longer than I've been in community development. And they've always targeted this, that particular northeast side of Cleveland.
Yeah.
But now their dollars are being sort of reinvested where you're getting a call from this investor from California or from France. So these things are happening where they're flying in. They're already going to the people who are already here. And so the people who are already here think they already know the game, they know the process, they know the system.
Yeah.
That part needs to be changed a little bit.
That's great, Laura, thank you. For those at home in your pajamas, Lothario was walking through how like the lack of some of these in place draw people to Cleveland to do predatory acts because the secret's out, right? That you can do it here a lot easier than you can in other neighborhoods. And that the out of market dynamics where their dollar buys more in a real estate standpoint only throws gas on that fire and really highlights the need for these various protections. Okay, with that, I think we'll move to the next section.
Justin, we just have some questions on
Sure.
the chat here.
Yeah, I'm terrible. Yeah.
So Jamie here from Old Brooklyn CDC. She
Hey,
asks,
Jamie.
Wall Street Journal is reporting that hedge funds and foreign governments are buying up single families, and they really love Cleveland. What tools besides code enforcement can the city use to help deal with this onslaught of cash buyers?
Yeah, and we touched on that a couple different places, and they're right. Like there is big money in this outside of just the guy in his basement wanting to sort of spend this. It's big money now doing it as well. Some of them are things like the certificate of disclosure. Some of it is a potential point of sale. Some of it is, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is like when you do have bad actors, it's too easy to not go to court. And we will find out is that typically the folks that wind up in court are the good guys because they can find them. And even some of our respective organizations, I'll never forget the first time Judge Bianca walked me up and down on a trash thing. And he's like, usually you're on the other side of the bar, Mr. Plummer. I'm like, what am I? I'm not the bad guy, but whatever. But it speaks to sort of the environment that makes that too easy for bad actors to act.
And one more question here from Tony Jones. Even when the disclosure is filed, who physically checks if there are violations? Is it the owner's word or do they check with the city?
Yeah, so with disclosure and the inspection is the city doing all of that. So it is building and housing that goes out that does the inspection. It's filed as part of the recorder record, so it's there. It's really just an informational piece. That's why I said it's kind of a middle step before something more aggressive, like a point of sale would be in place here.
Justin, a clarification on the certificate of disclosure, it does, building and housing does not go out and then do an inspection. It only reports if there is a violation or condemnation that has already been filed, that is
That's
open
right.
on that.
Yep, it's,
So it's, I don't want anybody to get the idea that they then go out and inspect it somehow.
yeah, no, no,
These
no.
are past, these are just saying, is it in a historical district, and what are the costs around it, the legal limitations? And is there an open violation notice? If it's a misdemeanor violation notice, if people don't know, it's only good for 2 years.
Yep.
And if it's a condemnation notice, then it stays open until the demolition. So I just want people
Yep,
that
those
aren't familiar to get
Great,
that
great
clarification.
points. Yep.
Thank you, because I didn't know at first either. So we want to move on. I see Sherry in the back waving her hand.
No, we talked a lot about the bad actors in the space, the bad investors. But there's also small investors that are local investors. And we have programs that are trying to provide technical support, capitals, suddenly like the contractors on the rise, and now the developers on the rise. So what we're seeing a reinvestment in those individuals, primarily people of color, minority-owned businesses that need capital, that need, funding to support their enhance their capabilities. So on the, there is a flip side to that. So how do are there other programs that are going in place that are really supporting those that are small actors trying to play a more prominent role in local investment throughout our community?
It's great points from my colleague Sherry Dozier. For those at home, Sherry was making the point that we've talked a lot about bad actors and bad things, but we also need to highlight how do we support the good things? How do we make sure there are resources for good actors to do the work that counteracts all the bad acting work? And I think that speaks to the Cleveland attitude that we had a little bit earlier. We're so hard on ourselves sometimes. We only see the bad, but there are a lot of good organizations that do good work that need the support too.
Okay,
Okay,
Justin, I know you guys want to move on.
we do.
Just want to clarify, if we're doing clarifying points,
Yes.
point of sale is a county. It's a county transaction.
That's right. Yep.
Real estate transfer at the county, not at the city.
Yep. Thank you, Councilman.
Yes.
Okay, housing programs. I think I did the last one. Right?
I believe so. I'll take this from here. So the first bullet in housing programs, recommendation is to increase home ownership in the city by 5% in the first 4 years of the new administration. And there's some more details there. I guess I could let you all read them on your own, but that is the goal. And if you notice, there's a number, there's a time. We don't think that is too far-fetched. I think when we talked about this, Justin, I asked, what is the home ownership rate now in Cleveland? If you could share that with
About
folks.
50%. It varies neighborhood to neighborhood, but like citywide, it's about 50. Healthy would probably be something closer to 60 to 65. So when you look at more stable markets, that tends to be in typologies like Cleveland, what a healthy home ownership rate would be. So some work to do there.
All right.
Next, update the city's tax abatement policy to use the data to provide greater incentives in weak and middle markets, encourage rehabilitation and updating housing stock, address transportation-oriented development, housing typology, and land use priorities, and expand environmental targets. So a lot there, but it's really around tax abatement and how we use it. The tools it stands today is from the early 2000s, had a very specific goal in mind, was a huge carrot to get developers to come into the city. There's the 15-year abatement on single family. There's commercial deals that happen, large scale things. But the general consensus is that we just need to refine the tool. There was a study done that looked at this that Director Maness led the charge on. There's a lot of good models around the country that can be adapted here to address the equity concerns of it, who's getting this abatement and who's paying their taxes, but also how to drive markets that aren't seeing the activity that they should, right? So particularly how do we use it to do more development on the east side and minority neighborhoods. Most of the tax abatements are going downtown to larger developments or in the near west side. So a lot to consider there.
All right, thank you, Justin. The next point is to triple the impact of Cleveland's home repair programs and reduce bureaucratic hurdles to participation by working with community and nonprofit partners who may be better equipped to administer programs to achieve scale and efficiency. Reading that one, I think we're not implying that the city is not capable of doing these things. And as a student of public administration, I took a lot of classes in this room. I know that bureaucracies are important and government is important to how we function. And so this recommendation is really to utilize the CDCs and the other community partners to help administer that because the need is so great. It's not realistic to think that the city could just fix all of the homes in the city of Cleveland that need repair. And so participate and partner with nonprofit partners who don't have to go through the various checks and, I shouldn't say checks and balances, but regulations that come with the bureaucracy. We're a little bit more nimble. And especially when it comes to things like home repair, if someone's roof is leaking, you don't want to wait for that process. So some of the things that we've done is address sort of immediate needs with resources that we have at Burtonville Park. And then we'll recommend that a person apply for a city program like the Department of Aging for a big investment like a roof that our resources wouldn't be able to cover. But we let them know that that's like a 6-month at least. So I'm getting-
It's like 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. So I'm getting-
6 months is not the most optimistic.
I've had people die waiting.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks for that, thanks.
yes.
I had 2 people die waiting.
Yeah, so there lies the issue.
And so we just feel like with partnership, we can triple the impact of these home repair programs. And I think we can all agree that there's definitely a need to do something in a different way. I just cringe a little bit when it seems like we're like beating up the city because we need city government.
Yeah.
That's just my personal public administration hat.
Well, that's a great point. Like, yeah, this shouldn't be thought of like, here's a list of things the city is doing wrong necessarily, right? Like, it's here's where we recognize our challenges and what we think we should be focused on to fix a really complicated set of variables. Next one, invest in community development finance institutions, other housing finance partners. So this is key to so much, right? So this is your build capital, CDA, or recently Cleveland Housing Partners. It overlaps with some other ones. Perhaps some of that CRA credit could be invested into these organizations, which are more nimble, more able to make products that can actually get deployed on the ground. We have a really great example in the Believe mortgage that CHNP, I'm calling them CHN. I'll take that, Kevin. It's getting up there. I mean, there are institutions that can be more nimble than a national bank, right? And can meet these needs. We just have to make sure that we're getting them the resources that they need.
All right. Maintain and expand the loan loss reserve for middle neighborhoods that encourages private investment. And you know, I'm going to pass that one to you, Justin,
Yeah.
because I don't know that I fully understand.
So right now, there's $1 million loan loss reserve that's allowing for first mortgages to be made in some of these middle markets here. That is having great success, but that should be expanded on. 1 million sounds like a lot of money, and so we're talking about large neighborhoods, right? So it's a proof of concept, and we need to, we're recommending that we expand that, take that model, maybe even into neighborhoods that are merged.
So break it down for me if you look, sometimes I'm slow. So if a developer purchased a house in a middle neighborhood for $50,000 and it costs them $50,000 more to rehab it, but they can only sell it for,
Yeah, that's a
going
different
down the road?
tool. That's a different tool.
Okay.
Yep. And that's why we talk.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So what this is it's truly a loan loss reserve. So if a lending institution makes a home purchase a loan to a regular buyer, they're going to go through some underwriting that says this is a risky loan for us because there hasn't been a lot of these transactions. It's only getting these appraisals. If we were to know that if this deal were to go bad, there's a pot of money that could help recover the loan, we'd be more willing to lend. So it's a safety net to a lending institution that gets them more comfortable in their underwriting, which some is internal, some is there's federal regulations on where you can and can't lend. So there is a little bit of back and forth there. A loan loss reserve like that is a good tool to sort of calm those fears.
And the recommendation is to maintain and expand. So that
Exactly,
means
yep.
we have it existing.
We have $1 million one right now.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you for explaining
No
that to
problem.
me. Hopefully that was helpful to other folks.
Yeah. But this actually, you were right on to the next one. Triple the impact of Cleveland's construction gap financing program. So especially now with materials at the price they are, with labor at the price they are, it's very expensive to build. What we're finding is that building quality housing is costing more than these markets are ready to support. And that isn't a permanent problem. Like once you start to do this type of investment and make these types of sales, you can raise the sort of perceived price of housing and get it to a sustainable level. But that takes time and that takes investment. It takes setting some of these sales on the board. Cleveland has a program that looks at what the construction cost is and brings essentially subsidy to on a house by house basis that brings that cost down to the developer and allows this housing activity to happen. It's a byproduct of all the different things we've talked about. I mean, there's the historic sort of things with lumber and just materials that are kind of outside of that. But all of these other sort of market stagnation things have driven costs down to a point that our development market isn't fully functioning the way it should. So we have a great tool here, expand on it and increase the impact, triple the impact. So we are running behind. I think we got to just keep going on to the next section and we'll talk from there.
Okay, the next section is renters and landlords. So the recommendation is to prohibit discrimination against renters based on their source of income. And I think all of us would agree that discrimination is bad, but we may not all realize, yes, that discrimination happens based on their source of income. And so we're talking about housing choice vouchers. We have the director of the Housing Authority here in the room, and he can probably tell you the challenge that they have finding quality homeowners to accept the housing choice vouchers for residents to live in. And this is saying that that's a form of discrimination. And so we want the new administration to prohibit that. And that's just one example.
Yep. Pass pay to stay legislation. So this is really designed to help with like COVID-like situations where you have a temporary loss of income. So you have a family emergency. Sometimes it's not even a family emergency. Your car breaks. You can't get to work. You lose your job. It takes you 2 months to get a new job. But in that meantime, you're evicted, right? And now your life is spinning out of control for a relatively minor thing. There's nothing fair about that. It shouldn't happen to people. Is there legislation and programs we can have to help with that temporary loss of income, keep people in their homes, and make sure that relatively minor things don't tumble into life-altering events that affect populations of color drastically more than white folks. Huge issue there.
All right, pass a property tax relief program for low-income homeowners that encourages them to remain in their neighborhoods and enjoy wealth-building opportunities at the point of sale. So I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory, but a lot of times when we're out in the neighborhoods, the folks that have been there forever, they're like, you're here because you want me gone. And that is the opposite of what we're saying. We want to provide ways to keep people here. These are the folks who have been here in the good and the bad times, and they should be able to benefit when the neighborhood turn good again.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, and it particularly pointed now with the revaluations coming out 23% if you just across the board in most of the city. It's going to affect some people drastically. Okay. Please establish rental assistance, landlord tenant abatements, and other incentives to keep rents affordable. So we have a lot of activity in the rental space. We see rents climbing in a lot of different places, and there's a general fear in certain neighborhoods that you're going to set a ceiling that a lot of folks can't achieve, right? And there's incentives both on the landlord side and the renter side that can be established to make sure that affordable housing available to the entire spectrum of income are available in all neighborhoods. There are great examples nationally. It's a somewhat new problem for Cleveland, and a lot of what we're seeing is Cleveland is managing growth in parts of our city in a way that we haven't done since the 50s. So we haven't flexed a lot of these muscles in a long time. We don't have these programs in place. This is one example of those things that we need to recognize as an issue, fund, and make sure that folks can stay in their neighborhoods.
I think it's an opportunity for us to learn what to do and what not to do from other cities as
Right,
well.
that's exactly right.
So we saw what happened in other cities, and we don't want the bad things to happen here. Engage in vigilant code enforcement and rental registration to hold absentee landlords accountable for maintaining their properties. I think that was pretty simple.
Vigilant, that's right.
I know, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
It made me think of Peggy.
Right.
Vigilant code enforcement.
Yep.
Thank you.
We had a couple examples already today, right? There's a lot of building and housing measures that aren't being enforced in the way that perhaps they should be. So how do we ramp up that enforcement, make sure that landlords and owners are doing what they need to do?
Enforcement partnership manual.
Yep. The other, and there's a lot of different ways that could be structured. We had a partnership with CDCs a number of years ago, where they were working hand in hand in trying to bring at least the worst actors to the table. Could we provide something like that? But the baseline is just make code enforcement rev it up. Pass legislation that holds property managers accountable and requires property owners outside of Cuyahoga County to appear physically in court for violations. So this goes to some of the things we talked about earlier, right? It is too easy to be a bad property manager or owner in the city in a lot of ways. That's what attracts them here. There are measures that can be passed, is particularly making sure that they have to come here or have a bench warrant that would discourage that type of activity. That you can't just have one manager that manages 200 properties for you and nobody can ever get a hold of and constantly has issues in the neighborhood. Build a system that holds those folks more accountable. Okay, given the time, I think we need to go right into the dotting of things. So for those at all, we have about a 5-minute break. But what I'm going to ask is, folks, we have a bin up here. I've got 3 little dots in it. Come up here and in an orderly line, put a dot to what you think is the most important, and we'll sort of see where it stands for everybody.
And so if there's one that's really important to you, you can put all 3 of your dots on one point.
Yeah, that's
Or,
right.
you can put one on each. So we're giving each of you 3 votes. Choose wisely and have at it. We should play the Jeopardy.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll reconvene or sit back down at 2:45. Thank you. It was appropriate. Always count on you. No pressure. Time's out.
Did we get to vote, Justin?
Sure, yeah.
And for the folks in the Zoom room, we have separate instructions for them, right?
Yeah,
I don't remember what they were.
I'm handling it, Dwight. I got it.
We were professors during this pandemic. We would have been fine.
Right. we really were. I knew we had something for you.
We were doing something with it.
Yes.
These are partial recalls.
Yes, yes. So if you're sitting, does that mean you're not voting?
No, just it means we're waiting patiently for the
Gotcha.
COVID standards.
Right. Yeah, I know we are exercising our rights to vote.
No, he's not.
I had a similar thought like 2 weeks ago. I'm just getting old.
Yeah,
This is the days when I pick my son.
right.
Yeah, I just have something going on, yeah.
This has been out for years. Where was it?
Oh, my God, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
It's gonna happen. Yeah, right, exactly.
that we were. Okay, we're working on progress.
It's gonna be tough to find skills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
30.
Yep.
Sure. Yes.
One is regular directions.
Yeah.
And quarterly. And I think this is the talking points. Where are we on these? And which ones are, yeah, we're working on them, aren't you working on it? I think that's what we're rolling.
We did. We just finished our early partnership. Our mindset. So I'm gonna have these kind of like. You guys. Okay, so.
Hey, you are doing it.
Yeah.
You are fabulous. Yeah.
Oh, I have to write it down.
I gotta be honest. You know,
All right, my little timer says it's 2:45. Oh, no, all of the houses have fallen. You know, that's a good thing or bad thing. Does that mean we accomplished everything? Or so? Look, I just heard the part I was still voting. I heard the first part. I'm like, oh, yeah. Go ahead. You're a city resident, right? So you're a city resident? All right, Justin, it's time for us to.
You can look at it. For people traveling.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe I'll bring it over here.
Now, how are we doing with the chat? Are folks going to the chat?
Out of the 15, 13 participate, so.
Yeah.
We should do it. Next one, which will probably start.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so we're back, folks, and we have our results. Nice job, everybody. Also, these are very straight. Looks like the one that has the most is that updated tax abatement policy. It had a bunch of stuff sort of sprinkled in it, but it seems to be where that is. I'm sorry, I'm reading it wrong. I was complimenting your straight line, but it got me confused. The one that has the most is the triple the impact of Cleveland's home repair programs and reduce bureaucratic hurdles. So there's just so much. I mean, you drive around any neighborhood, you see so many houses that have look like, relatively straightforward things, but folks can't get the resources to fix their porch, to get the roof together, to fix the broken driveway. And we're an older city, right? So we've got stock from century homes. So there's a lot that needs to happen here. We also have stock that isn't as old, but is reaching its end of its usable life, anticipated usable life that needs that type of repair. What else we got?
Well, can I put my vote on that?
Yeah, sure.
Fill that in there. Looks like the second highest, is it either this one or?
Yeah, it's close between those two.
So I'll read in the renters and landlords section, pass legislation that holds property managers accountable and requires property owners outside of Cuyahoga County to appear physically in court for violations.
So that ties really closely with the other one that's about that many, with create policies and practices that proactively deter predatory investment. So it's keeping it out of the hands of the predatory investors in the first place, but once they do have it, make sure it's managed in a way that is fair and meets the needs of the community, and make sure that it isn't too easy to be a bad actor.
I'm still voting, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Voting has now closed.
Yeah, right. And then maybe and the rest are kind of close, but maybe at 4 or 5 is the launch a locally funded housing trust fund in partnership with Cuyahoga County. So we talked about that as important. The resources we have aren't enough, and maybe aren't as flexible as we'd like them. And then the last one is that, or the other one that had 4, yeah, it's right there. Go for it, Joey.
Establish rental assistance for landlord tenant abatements and other incentives to keep rents affordable.
Very good. So what do we think about that? I'll put it back up here.
So do we have, how many people are doing absentee?
Oh, can we
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about who's in the Zoom room? Thank you.
Well, we actually had some technical difficulties here. Yeah, we had a wrong list of questions. So yeah, their questions wasn't related to housing.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
sure that they will share their feedback with the other group. So that's all right. Sometimes these things, we try to make them hybrid, and we're still working out the kinks, but
Yeah.
that's okay. That's what they tell us, right?
So reactions, thoughts, anybody surprised by what we see up there? Yes, sir.
This is Daniel again from West Town. I think, at least for me, because I've railed against the bureaucratic hurdles, what I'm talking about, quick, sitting right there, I had a resident, low-income senior, who wanted to repair his porch. Does the city really need us to put down what type of wood he uses? There is so many things, when you get into the scopes of work, getting everything set for it. It took over a month for this guy to be able to do his porch because of so many little things where we would get rejected. Someone say, well, we need to know what type of screws they're using. Legitimately things that were asked of us.
Yeah.
And then with Department of Aging, we cut a limb down the other day because Department of Aging was going to take 9 months to cut a limb down that was endangering a home of one of our seniors. We took it down yesterday, and that's not something we should be doing. We're not tree workers.
Yeah.
Like, if they need more funding and they need more resources to speed up these processes, it's hard when we start sending out Department of Aging age-friendly home improvements, and I have to tell someone you might get that maybe in the next 2 to 3 years we can get your roof fixed.
Yeah.
These kind of things are unacceptable, and they'll say that it's contractors. Well, then the city should make it more incentivized and more appealing to local contractors to want to work with them, because it's so much extra stuff they have to do just to get on the list.
Yep.
We're being asked now to find people for them because they can't find anybody that wants to work with them. Like, that's the bureaucratic hurdle of things.
That's a lot of great points there. And for those at home, a gentleman from West Town was reflecting on the programs that do exist have so many what sometimes seem like arbitrary points and steps to get through, and the process is so difficult to get to. One, you can't do it in a timely manner. So when you have emergencies, you wind up not being able to address those. The other being that I'm losing my thought here. Joy, help me out.
That they don't have contractors to.
Right. Yeah, the programs are so laborious that even the ones that are in place, they're not functioning at the level they could be because folks just don't want to participate. It's just too much work.
To your point, just thinking about one of the recommendations you said is the issue that we need more money. Does the city need more money? And so that there's more staffing. And I think that's one solution. But I'm sure that the folks at the city that are asking for what type of wood, they're not doing this just because they want to be mean. They're doing this because HUD or some other entity is telling them that this is what has to be done. And so how do we, it makes me think about the recommendation on the locally funded housing trust fund. Might there also be locally funded home repair dollars that don't require all of those hoops, and we can get some of these things done faster? Yes, we have two hands.
Sorry. I was gonna say, the only problem with that is, and we sort of bit the bullet, I don't know if our ego again, that because somebody's on your staff receiving city dollars, what type of wood is always gonna exist, as long as he's doing it, he's receiving city money. And so, what I will say is, we went through so many, we write our own scopes of work at Nico. What I will say is, we're willing to do some sort of, we can actually talk offline, do some scope writing, sort of one-on-one with everybody.
Who are you five?
Well, you know what, normally that's a, and again, I don't want to step on John's toes, normally, you know, but I will say that just as a practitioner doing this work, that is probably the most frustrating thing. My colleague in the back, he worked at Ozan for 30 years. So I will say that it's one of the most, you want to help this person, you want to help this individual, but the very first step is doing the scope work.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know how to do a scope of work. I'm not standing right there, but we're getting down to the most picky things that no contract would write out.
Yeah.
Granted, you're in a different situation, but Bob's roofing, yeah, it's,
And what I will say is contractors are really good at doing really one thing. Some of them are good at doing a lot, but some of them are good at one thing, and that's actually put the actual portion on. So what I educated my contractors on every single day is the technical part of their job that they should be up to date on, which is writing scopes of work that is acknowledged by the city or county or anybody from a significant role and that does construction and rehab work. They understand it. So they're going to say, we're going to take off 15 feet of porch deck and replace it. What do you want to know? Tongue and groove, 5/8, like what are you putting it on? And so it's more the technical. You may not need it, but others in the room, I'm offering that.
And I think it shows how they connect, because what I'm also hearing is that there's opportunities to train small and minority business owners, and that's a recommendation and a different priority and a different breakout room, but it all connects. So you were gonna say something.
I was thinking how to think about maybe the other room too, and even maybe establishing a link between the CDCs and program providers, maybe like some sort of like technical link, so we can upload documents and things like that, especially the COVID. We don't know if it's going to get better or worse. And so once a week I go downtown, I'm going to the Department of Aging, Cleveland Community Housing Solutions on the west side, or I'm headed to an agency to turn in applications, especially people who are mobile. And I think maybe trying to just establishing some sort of a link where we can upload these documents and all of this data. And it's also a good way for us to start tracking data, because then I can check, like I can check, you know, I can fill in the age or whatever, and I mean, that can actually feed into a system to get all of this data. So that way we can make it easier, keep it safe, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great point. And really reflecting on the need to modernize City Hall, to build systems, to share information, to put applications in. If you need to go to different organizations, how do you sort of centralize all that? That makes things quicker, that you're not losing a whole day standing in line, maybe you're trying to find the right department. There are examples of it, it exists. How do we get that here? Peggy.
I just want to add to what AJ said, and again, in modernizing and updating an interface, is that if City Hall is going to recognize the CDCs as part of the field work, you know, we're the ones out there, we're the ones engaging with our residents, also giving us feedback. I mean, if we're submitting the application, that means that senior has given us all of their private information. And so a lot of times they're like, we can't get your senior. Well, okay, then talk to us. Our senior doesn't understand what you're asking about. So we've submitted the application. So let me know what you need so I can work with them. We can't, no. There has to, I know that there are paperwork that you can sign off on that says, I give this person the authorization.
Yeah.
We've been asking for that for years. So make it so that we can work with our seniors or our disabled, whoever needs help. And authorizing us to speak and try to find out why something comes up at City Hall. And it doesn't just get passed over.
Yeah. So Peggy's making the point that the relationship with the city and the CDC needs to be sort of firmed up, needs to trust the CDC partner to work with the residents to implement those programs. How do you strengthen that so that you guys can do the work that you're built to do and the city wants to see you do? But there are current hurdles in there.
We might have time for one or two more.
Adam.
Probably last.
We might be, we only have 3 minutes, so.
So from the voting, from reading this housing policy, which really we're presenting this to the new administration as our priorities when it comes to housing. From the voting, it seems like the summary on the left side of the book under the photo is very good at summarizing it. But if we have 3 points that we want to drive home with the new administration from this conversation, from the voting, and just from my priorities too, it seems that it's helping existing and potential homeowners, holding investors accountable, and ensuring affordability. So if we need 3 things that we need to drive home with the new administration, it seems to me that those are the 3.
There's their agreement there, that those encapsulate what we need.
Pretty much.
And just to repeat for those on Zoom, Adam from Northwest Neighborhoods Development Corporation. Some of you may, yes, some of you may know them as Detroit Shoreway Community Development Organization. They are new name. That if we were to summarize everything we heard today, there's 3 things, and now I'm going to 3 things. Assist current and potential homeowners. Hold investors accountable.
Affordability.
And keep housing affordable. Yes. So,
I like it.
thank you.
We have 1 minute left. Any closing thoughts, comments, anything on the chat? Not, that's okay. So I want to thank everybody for participating. This has been really helpful for us. And so we're going to keep this, we're going to integrate it. And I think we have a nice, really sort of platform to move forward on, and can't wait to hear what the candidates say. So thanks, everybody. And thanks, Joy.
Thank you, Justin. So we're starting.
Oh, that's right.
I'm sorry.
We had this whole high jump thing.
How do we stop this?
Yeah, that's what you didn't really have that step right.
It's a short list. That's right, yeah.